What is happening, my good people? It is a Wednesday. Welcome aboard here as we go through the sports landscape. As over the next hour plus, depending on how long I go here, I am looking forward to sharing my thoughts, feelings, opinions, and all that when it comes to what's happening on the hardwood, on the ice, on the diamond, gridiron, etc. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for joining. I don't know if the camera's a little off here. Is it me or let's see? Hope I don't tweak it too much. All right. For some reason, it looks like it's a little on the crooked side. But with that being said, yes, let's get right into it. And first and foremost, as you know, this is a Wednesday live stream here from the lunch hour on the East Coast, 12 to 1, 1:15, maybe 1:30, depending. But if you are here for the very first time, welcome aboard. If you have not, if you've been here the last couple of weeks, including the anniversary live stream, and even before that, the couple that I've had, welcome back. I am anticipating a fast-paced, jam-packed, action-filled with sports talk, and there is so many different directions to go, but I know that with the National Football League, as I like to call it, the impenetrable shield, just like the famous logo that they have, it sucks the oxygen out of any room when it comes to sports. As we all know, it's the most popular sport. It's the most entertaining from the standpoint of players and with personalities, quarterbacks, teams, Cowboys, Steelers, Jets, Giants. I mean, you can go down the list. And even though I could argue that, baseball being my first love, and of course we'll get to baseball later. But and Jonathan, of course, as always, thank you so much for hopping on board. I'll get to your questions in a second. Oh, this is always a good one. So I got to big up you for that one. Audio and video is good. Wait, does that mean that the audio and video in the past hasn't been that good? No, I'm teasing. But with that being said, and I'm going to get to your NBA question in a minute. I'm going to start off with the football, though, only because, and also before I even get to that, for those who are going to watch the replay, leave a comment. I will certainly pick up from where this ends, and I get all of my comments filtered through my email, so I'll be more than happy to follow up. So don't feel as if once this is already put to rest and you're watching this tonight, tomorrow, over the weekend, and you don't feel like, I'm not going to leave a comment. I wasn't there live, so why should I? No, please. I welcome all the comments, and it's very important for you to leave a message on whatever it is that you're thinking, feeling. You need to get off your chest. You need to get at me at something, please. That's why the chat feature for those who are on live, but even more so, even though when this expires, you could still leave a comment, and I'll be more than happy to follow up. And then, like I mentioned, let's work the chat room, as Jonathan has already done so. And I know he's my first and only guest right at this very moment. So hopefully, as we get deeper into the hour, more people will join and hop on board. So, yes, let's get right to it with the NFL, the free agent frenzy, and the storylines. And to me, there's only two. And, yes, I understand I could go through the whole laundry list of players that have signed elsewhere, the trades that have taken place, the improvements that are made elsewhere for some teams. Teams are still looking for a quarterback, including my Pittsburgh Steelers, which happens to be one of my storylines, not because I am a huge Steeler fan, but the first one that I have to put right out on the board are the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers, a team that over the last half decade has been to a couple of Super Bowls and multiple NFC Championship games. And then last year, you could call it, whether it's bad luck, dumb luck, or just a thing where they had a rough offseason, not only losing that Super Bowl to the Chiefs, but also not getting guys in camp, whether their name is Trent Williams, whether their name is Brandon Ayuk, and then for Ayuk to tear his knee and was out for the year. I guess that was, about week 5 or 6? And not getting on track the way the Niners have been prior to last year, where they've made deep runs in postseasons, as I mentioned, but for them to lose a lot of these players here in the offseason, whether your name is Charvarius Ward, whether your name is the linebacker Dre Greenlaw, Javon Hargrave, I mean, just a ton of players that they've lost, offensive linemen, and for them now to even think to retool and possibly see if they could get themselves back to some sort of respectability. The good thing is that the division isn't really that strong. And mind you, the caliber of play there in the NFC West has kind of been the same last year, because when you had the Rams, when it was all said and done, won a division, but what were they, 10-7? I think maybe 9-8, but I believe they were 10-7 when it was all said and done. So it's not as if you had a team run away, a la the Niners of the years past, where they've had in essence of, or in upwards of 12, 13, maybe even 14 wins. Because you had Arizona about 10 weeks into the season, 11 weeks, they were 6-4 and they were in first place. Then you had Seattle at one point, they were 8-5 and they were in first place. And then the Rams took over late, won the division, and then obviously got themselves in position to almost get to an NFC championship game where they lost to the Eagles there in that divisional round. So it's not as if for them to retool or even maybe to even reload, that it's not out of the realm of possibility that they will not have a successful offseason, considering a lot of the players that have exited and jettisoned, and who knows if Christian McCaffrey is going to be a guy that may be on the move, considering that he wasn't healthy 100% throughout the course of the year. And they have to pay Brock Purdy, who I would think is going to get not $50 million. I mean, that'd be pretty much just asinine if you're going to give him that type of money, despite the fact that he took his team to a Super Bowl. But he's more of a system quarterback. He's a guy that has to have the pieces in place around them in order for him to thrive. And with Kyle Shanahan being that offensive wizard that he is, as far as his game plans and what he's able to come up with week in and week out. But remember, also, Deebo Samuel's now in Washington as they traded him. So he'll probably get somewhere, if you ask me, probably a 3-year deal worth $100 million, similar to what Sam Darnold just got. And I think that would be respectable considering the market. He's not going to get the $50 million plateau of Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert and beyond. That's not going to be the case. So I would think you'll probably get a contract similar to what Sam Darnold got in Seattle. But the Niners, to me, were the big story so far, because a lot of players have left. A lot of players went on to greener pastures. And now you have to wonder what the Niners and John Lynch, the GM, are going to do to kind of put this team back to some sort of respectability, not only in that division, as I talked about, but throughout the conference. Because as we know, although the conference has gotten a little bit better over the last couple of years, we know about what Detroit's done the last 2 years, more so in the regular season. We saw them fizzle out against the Commanders in the divisional round this past season. But between them, the defending champs, in the Philadelphia Eagles, NFC South, to me, that is a mishmash. I get it. Tampa may be the favorite coming out when we look at the NFL season in another 5-6 months from now. But you don't have a lot of solid teams. You don't have a lot of big-time teams, unlike the AFC, as we all know, with Baltimore and Kansas City and Buffalo and Cincinnati when Joe Burrow and company and everybody's healthy there. So there is going to be a situation for the Niners to regroup and get themselves back. But what do? Obviously, that remains to be seen, because as we know, they will have Brandon Ayuk back, you would think, by the start of training camp. And when you have another plethora of weapons that they had left already with Samuel, and who knows what's going to happen with McCaffrey here, it's certainly going to be an overhaul, to say the least, there by the Bay Area for the Niners. So that, to me, that was the storyline number one when it comes to what had taken place here over these last few days. And the other one is going to be the quarterback situation. I'm going to start off with Pittsburgh only for this reason. They were able to let Justin Fields go, and now he's going to be a member of the Jets. He signed a 2-year, $40 million deal. And with them bringing in DK Metcalf from Seattle via trade, second-round pick was sent to Seattle for the services of Metcalf, and then they signed him to a 5-year, $150 million deal. So the first question is, like, who's going to get him the ball? You can't have a wide receiver of that ilk, a guy who arguably, we talked about this, now that I think about it, when we had the anniversary live stream, where you look at the top 10 wide receivers in the sport. Now, DK Metcalf, he probably does fall more so in that 6 to 10 range. And even though his production had slipped a little bit, granted that it was Geno Smith, and not that Geno Smith is a world beater by any stretch, but you have to think that Metcalf, when healthy, he is a top flight receiver in the sport. And for the Steelers, knowing that Fields is gone, and even though Russell Wilson is still out there, are they going to revisit bringing Wilson back, and of course the familiarity that Wilson had with DK Metcalf in Seattle, does that play into Omar Khan, the GM, bringing him back into the mix, or does that mean they go outside of that? Dare I even say Aaron Rodgers, where there have been some sources saying that Rodgers could be a favorite to end up in Pittsburgh, which to me, and I've said this all along, I do not want Rodgers a part of the Steeler offense or even on the team for that matter. And it's not a personal issue by any means, but he is 41 years of age. His mobility, as we all know, is compromised. We've seen what he's done, even though last year, decent numbers, 28 touchdowns. What do you have? I think 11 interceptions, 3 in one game against the Vikings in London, I might add. And then on top of all that, he threw for just a shade below 4,000 yards. But I don't know if he's going to be that much of an upgrade, considering the offensive line is still gelling. They have a very young offensive line and that they've drafted here over the last several years. And even one of their guys, James Daniels, he actually left to go. I forgot where he signed. I don't know if he signed in Jacksonville, but he did leave. So now that leaves them not necessarily a little bit thin, but when it comes to being cohesive, that offensive line, you're going to have guys that are going to be there 2-3 years and are still working their chemistry behind a guy that, if they do bring him back, is going to be 41 years of age. And even with Russell Wilson, not to say that he's a spring chicken by any stretch, I believe he's 36 years old, and we know his mobility has been compromised. So that quarterback situation right now is up in the air. And it's not that the Steelers have a high draft pick, not that this is a quarterback draft that you're going to look at, or a quarterback class in this draft that you're going to look at and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe they can move up to get this guy, or they can maneuver picks here, picks there to see if they could draft a guy maybe somewhere in the 10, 11, 12 range. No, the Steelers are drafting well below that. And it's not going to be a quarterback that's going to fall unless you're thinking Jackson Dart, which a lot of people think he's going to go in the second round, the quarterback from Ole Miss. Is that going to be a reach if the Steelers see him there and at 20 and, let's see if we can draft him to be our guy that's going to lead us hopefully from 2026 and beyond, if they're going to bring back Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers here as a stopgap? To me personally, I don't want that. I'd rather them would have kept Fields, but we know that's moot at this point. If that means Wilson's going to come back, and I'm itching here, if that means Wilson's going to come back, then so be it. But I would think that they're going to have a game plan, whether that means they're going to try to draft somebody there if somebody does fall in the second round, or maybe move up to get that pick there, which could fall to the Giants. And that's going to be my next team I'm going to discuss in a moment, where maybe the Giants are going to target Jackson Dart because a lot of people think that he's not worthy of a first-round pick, that if he goes in the second round or even below that, it's certainly worth a gamble. But for the Giants now, and that's the other storyline here, because the Giants, as we all know, this regime of Joe Shane, the GM, and Brian Daboll, the coach, they are right now on the plank. And they may not be walking as of yet because they still have to see what's going to happen here this offseason. And they've made a lot of moves on the defensive side of the ball here over the course of these last 2 days. And guys that aren't really household names, guys that don't really jump off the page when you look at it. But they're trying to do what they can defensively, and then let's see what they're going to do with a quarterback, because they can bring back Lawrence Taylor, Harry Carson, Carl Banks. But if you do not have a guy under center that's going to be able to produce, perform, and put wins in the column for the head coach Brian Daboll, it's not going to mean anything. So for that organization, for that front office, they know that this is do or die. Now, what does this mean? Because if they're going to draft high as they are, and they had the number 3 pick overall, do they go Cam Ward? Do they go Shedeur Sanders? If by chance Travis Hunter, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, if he falls in their lap, which it probably could, even though the Browns, as we all know, we could think that they may draft a quarterback, but with the Deshaun Watson scenario regarding all of his guaranteed money, they may have to pass on a quarterback if the Tennessee Titans are going to draft Cam Ward number 1, as we possibly and may expect. So do they think about Shedeur Sanders? Do they think, no, let's go with the cornerback, his teammate there at Colorado, instead that could be that two-way player? And let's say if they do draft him, all right, you have a quarterback that's going to be there, you would think, for a decade. Do you actually put him in as wide receiver? Then begs the question, who's the quarterback of this team? Right now, the only quarterback that's on the roster as a member of the New York Football Giants is Tommy DeVito. Is he the guy that's going to be under center week one, whether it's at MetLife or on the road? I don't think so. Now, here's where it gets dicey, because do you pick Shedeur Sanders at number 3? Do you even think about going the route of bringing in a veteran quarterback, someone like Kirk Cousins, who we expect is going to be cut here, where Michael Penix would be the starter in Atlanta? You have all these different scenarios with the Giants, more so than with Pittsburgh, because they know they have the safety net with Russell Wilson. And I get it that the Giants can go out and get Russell Wilson, or even Aaron Rodgers for that matter, but knowing that the job is secure for Tomlin in Pittsburgh, at least so we think, considering it has been 18 years and they've only had 3 coaches in the last 56 years. But for Daboll and Shane, they know this is a big dice roll on whether they bring in that veteran guy for 1 year and hope they get a 9-8, 10-7 type year, that even if they're on the outside looking in, as far as the postseason, it's certainly been a lot better than the last 2 years. Or if they do bring in Shedeur Sanders, and let's say they win 6, dare I even say 7 games, is that going to be enough for them to keep their jobs, knowing that, all right, well, Sanders did have a solid year, showed promise. All right, you know you're going to have those growing pains with rookie quarterbacks where he's going to have that type of game, 13 for 33 with 4 picks and maybe even a fumble or 2 along the way. But if he does have some moments where he has fourth quarter comebacks, let's say he beats the Cowboys at home, or maybe another division rival where he played well against and fell short, where you know that this could be the quarterback of our future, unlike we've seen in the past with Jet quarterbacks, not to compare the Jets with the Giants, but when they drafted Sam Darnold high, or even Zach Wilson for that matter, what happened with them? They're no longer part of the team. So you knew that it was going to be a scenario where there was going to be a lot of length from that first-round pick to where there was not any promise. So for Sanders, if he comes in and shows some promise, at least they could buy another year between the quarterback, or between the head coach and the GM by having that quarterback in tow. But as we all know, here in New York, it's what have you done for me lately? And the GM certainly has a lot on his plate to try to figure out what they're going to do at that position. So to me, those are the 2 big storylines. Because, yes, we could talk about the contract Josh Allen got, $250 million guaranteed, $330 million. Or even Myles Garrett, who's now a $40 million man year, $123.5 million guaranteed, the most by a non-quarterback in the history of the sport, but he's still in Cleveland. We could talk about a lot of these other deals that have been made here over the course, even with the legal tampering policy, where now I believe at 4 o'clock today, that's where the NFL season is now a new season, where people could really go out shopping and procuring these players. But besides that, there isn't really anything else that I could say if we go through the list of players that have signed that you could say, oh, wow, that's going to be impactful. Or, oh, man, that's going to shift the division or even shift the conference by bringing in this player. We could talk about the C.J. Gardner-Johnsons from the Eagles being traded. And I know the Steelers just signed Kenneth Gainwell today, the former running back there, along with Saquon Barkley in Philadelphia. But those aren't headline-grabbing, moving the needle type of transactions that are going to make you think that, oh, wow, this team is already the winner of the free agency period. Oh, this team is the loser. It's only been a couple of days. And I'd never like to use those terms as far as even with the draft or with free agency in any of the sports. Oh, who are the winners or who are the losers? Because everybody could talk about when the Mets signed Juan Soto and everybody was up in arms, yours truly to a certain extent, but all right, we got Soto, but what's going to happen the rest of this offseason? And if you've heard me, whether on the podcast or here in these live streams, I am not sold by what the Mets did this offseason, because it's not Soto and let's put our feet up. And not to get into baseball just yet, but for this 48 to 72-hour window here with the NFL, I'm not going to sit here to think that, oh, well, this team flat out, they've won the offseason so far. Yeah, we can speculate that, and I understand that's good fodder for sports talk, but what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? It means nothing. So what, you won March 10th that you got this player or drafted, or when you get to the draft, you had the first 3 rounds littered with great picks or guys that were certainly on the come up, or were maybe not on the radar, and oh, wow, that was a steal. We could talk about that on April 28th or with the free agency here on March 12th. But we all know that once you get to training camp and then when the season starts in September, that's when it truly matters. Not here when we're trying to get through the doldrums of winter, knowing that we've had some nice days here in the Northeast and that spring is on the horizon. No, nobody cares about that right now. And even though people can bandy about it on other podcasts or live streams or shows or whatever it is, and that's fine. But with me, you're never going to get that because it really doesn't make any sense. Winners, losers, free agency, drafts, not this guy. So if you've come for that, I mean, we could open it up in the comments for those who are on. I know, Jonathan, I'll get to your comment there in a minute with the NBA. But there isn't anything else that I could truly get into. And I can even pull up this list now and even dive into it. And yes, I could say, all right, well, hey, this was a decent signing. Oh, wow, you got to look at what this team did to that. But again, am I going to go crazy about New England and them bringing in Milton Williams, Carlton Davis, the former corner, and Robert Spillane, who was a steel linebacker, to go along with Harold Landry, who they got there from Tennessee, for Mike Vrabel in New England? Those are great pickups. Those are fantastic, no doubt. But am I all of a sudden going to think that this New England defense is going to be similar to what Bill Belichick had there in his Super Bowl years? And I'm not even talking about the early years when he won the 3 in the 2000s, the ones here in the 20 teens. Am I going to be, oh, wow, they stole the free agency period? Those are good pickups, very mindful pickups. But again, is this something that, whoa, the Patriots are back? Pump the brakes. Can't get too crazy about that. And the same can be said with Carolina. I know they signed their own corner, J.C. Horn, the richest contract in NFL history when it comes to a defensive back. But, right, am I supposed to be, whoa, J.C. Horn? Is anybody watching Carolina Panther football? And I understand he's put up good numbers, and he's a guy that was a second-round pick, I believe, 2021. Kudos to him. Congratulations. But am I going to think that, wow, Carolina now, even with Bryce Young and what he did there in the second half of the year, showing that promise that we talked about, am I going to think that Carolina is not going to be an 8 or 9 win team because J.C. Horn is going to act like Deion Sanders? No, absolutely not. And then even with the Ravens signing DeAndre Hopkins, been there, done that with these signings. Odell Beckham Jr., how did that work out in Baltimore? He didn't light the world on fire. And we could go through all these different signings that have transpired here. And I get it that Washington's done a good job. We talked about Deebo Samuel. They traded for Laremy Tunsil there with the Texans. And they're doing what it takes to try to bring in some talent, especially on the offensive side for Jaden Daniels. And we know the type of season he had. But Tunsil, I mean, is this Jonathan Ogden? And I'm not knocking Tunsil by any stretch. But still, these aren't moves that have really, as I mentioned, moved the needle or jumped off the page. Be like, oh, wow, kudos to what they've done. Give them credit and give the Commanders all that they can handle from the standpoint of building from what they did last year, getting to an NFC Championship game, bringing in a guy like Deebo Samuel, that Swiss Army knife, a guy that is certainly versatile, but he does get hurt, and he does have one more year on his contract, so he knows he's going to want the big bucks at some point. And then with Tunsil, he still has 3 more years left on his deal. A guy who's a very good offensive lineman, offensive tackle, but is he going to be Anthony Munoz 2.0 here? You can't even say that. So, right, we can go through all these signings, whether it's Devontae Adams, whether it's Joey Bosa, as he goes to Buffalo. They get Von Miller out of there, and he's 100 years old, and they bring in Joey Bosa. All right, not bad, but Bosa's a guy that's another one. Step on his toe, he's on injured reserve. So I can't think of even that move for a Buffalo Bill fan to be like, all right, now we got the pass rusher that we need. Well, you had Von Miller, granted that he's older. I don't want to bash him by any means. But Joey Bosa, although younger, but it's not as if he's going to be a guy that's going to go in there and you could pencil him in for 15 sacks. You could pencil him in for probably missing 4 games, and you could have him for getting double-digit sack numbers. So, I mean, that's just how it is. And you can look at all these other teams. Daniel Jones signing with the Colts. Am I supposed to go crazy about that? He's going to compete with Anthony Richardson for the starting quarterback job there in Indy. I mean, seriously? Oh, wow, Daniel Jones. Stop the presses. Absolutely not. So that's what you had there with the NFL. I mean, I don't know what more else I could add. I like to go from a storyline perspective just to kind of get a 30,000-foot view of what we've seen here. But you could probably say that's the third storyline. Yeah, moves have been made. Yes, players have re-signed with their teams. And I'm sure we're going to see what's going to happen here this afternoon into tomorrow, where you'll get the next podcast, Apple, Spotify, jreels.com, of course, on YouTube at jreels. But you haven't had much to really chew on here, if you ask me, other than the Niners and what they have been over the last 5-6 years. I get it. Last year was a very lean year for them. But now it's even leaner considering their roster certainly has been depleted and how they're going to rebuild in order to get themselves back to respectability. And then the quarterback situation, especially in Pittsburgh and even with the Giants for that matter, considering the stakes are high in New York for them to get the right pick. Whether that means they're in love with Shedeur Sanders or if they go Travis Hunter and bring in a veteran quarterback, who knows? So that's the two big storylines. And the third one is that there hasn't been anything earth-shattering when it comes to free agency here with what has transpired over the last 2 to 3 days. That's all I can tell you. And as I move it along, and it's interesting enough, I'm going to get to Jonathan's question here. And the Cavaliers win 70 games. And it's fascinating from this regard because that's going to lead to my next topic. Now, you have an NBA Finals preview tonight, OKC and Boston, which I'll get to. But are you sold on the Cavaliers and the Thunder here in 2024, 2025? Because what we've seen here, and especially with Cleveland, and that's where I'm going to go based on Jonathan's question, the Cavaliers, I don't think anybody in their right frame of mind thought that they were going to have a year like this. They are now 55-10. Now, they're in the midst of a 15-game winning streak. This is now bookending the 15-game winning streak that started the year because they were 15-0 before they went to Boston and lost at the TD Garden. And since then, they have been steady and spectacular. And now here they are with another 15-game winning streak. And then the irony of this 15-game winning streak, on top of the 15-game winning streak to start the year, do you remember who their last loss was to? To the Celtics in Cleveland. So funny how this has really come full circle for the Cavs that starting their year 15-0, losing the Celtics, and then they lost to the Celtics, and they started a 15-game winning streak. So all I got to say is this. If you're in the Cleveland area or in the region there and a big NBA fan who loves the Cavaliers, and I don't know how many who watch or follow the live stream podcast are, but I don't think they're going to win 70 because right now they're currently at 55-10. So that means they would have to go, if they go 70-12, they would have to go 15-2 down the stretch of the season. Could that happen? I think it could. But that means they're going to have to reel off, let's say, another 7-8 game winning streak. And I have to look at their schedule. Maybe I'll pull it up just for grins and giggles. Why not? But here it is, 55-10 to get to 70, 15-2. And let's see, as I get the schedule, I'll have some fun here with Jonathan's question. Now, we understand that down the stretch of the season, players may rest and coaches may pull the reins back. Now, they're at Memphis, competitive game. Orlando. Now, they still have a West Coast trip, which isn't really daunting. They have to go to LA to play the Clippers. This is now starting Tuesday. At Sacramento, at Phoenix, at Utah, Portland. So Phoenix, I understand they're trying to fight for their playoff lives on the outside looking in. As a matter of fact, they may have overtaken the Mavs at this point. But then they play at Detroit. They had the Clippers at home. They still have the Knicks, where they've beaten the Knicks this year. Indiana twice, who won a miraculous game last night. I don't know if you saw that. Tyrese Halliburton hit a three, which he traveled on the play number one. I understand they're not going to call that in the NBA today, but the call on Giannis, I mean, that was ticky-tack. Really? It's not as if Giannis hacked him and then Halliburton took the shot. But anyway. They had to play the Knicks again at the Garden, Indiana twice. I'm going to say they're not going to get to 70. They probably will end up anywhere between 66 to 68 wins, which is a hell of a season. And I'll say this. If you're the Cavaliers and you have the 1 seed by a mile, I mean, they have a 9-game lead in the conference over the Celtics. But you have to understand, this goes back to the Cavalier fan, whether from Cleveland, Akron, or the entire state. I'm sorry. There's going to be a bullseye on your back on playoff time. And I don't want to hear, oh, it's been a nice story. Oh, I don't want to hear that because you won 66 or 68 games that, oh, if we make it to the conference finals and lose in a game 7, it's been a great season. You've had a season that nobody could have ever predicted or imagined. If somebody would have told me today that the Cavaliers would be 15-10 back in October, I'd say you're high, you're nuts. And let's just say, even put it in this perspective. If you asked me in October that the Cavaliers would win 55 games this year, I'd say that's a little too high. I'd say maybe 50, and I believe last year they won 50, if I'm not mistaken. If they would have won 50, 52, maybe they're ceiling at 54. And that's their ceiling to even go past that. But let's say 52. I'd say, all right, I can see them winning 52 games. They have a good team. We know who the players are. We don't have to go through their roster. And with Kenny Atkinson as coach, and we know he's a good coach, but did we think that he was going to have 55 wins by March 12th? I didn't think so. So this is why, to me, they have to get to a finals. It's finals or bust. Now, they could lose in the finals, which would still be bitter if they continue this monster regular season and get to 68, and dare I even say to get to 70. Could you imagine if they get to 70? Only 2 other teams in NBA history have done that. And that's why I don't think they're going to get to 70. But I will say this. If they do end up with 70 wins, they have to get to a finals. Anything less than that would be unacceptable. So all the pressure is going to be on them. And I think the pressure is going to be on them even starting now. Look at the season that they've had. 2 15-game winning streaks? Now, I get it. This isn't a Cavalier team unlike the LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love team that won 9 years ago. Because obviously they had star quality, box office quality, etc. They have star quality here with Donovan Mitchell, understood. Darius Garland, a very good point guard, and their front court also exceptional. When you have a rim protector like Jared Allen and you have a very versatile 4-man in Evan Mobley. And they have a very good solid bench. But this isn't a team that when you think of a championship. Now, this year, notwithstanding, I get it. But a lot of people, I'm sure, aren't sold on the Cavaliers, which, of course, begs the question as I just put up a second ago. I don't know if people are sold on him. And Jonathan has got the best ball movement with Donovan. He is. And he's going to be first-team All-NBA guard, without question. No ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. And then Cavs second-line starters. No, and they do. They have a very deep team with the Isaac Okoros of the world, the Ty Jeromes. They have a very good squad. I mean, listen, you don't get to 55-10 at this point and you're mediocre or average or you're doing it with smoke and mirrors. You're not. And that's where I got to be fair and give it up. And even in that game in Boston 2 weeks ago when they were down 25-3 in the first 5 minutes of the game, and they came back and won by 7. And I understand maybe I can get on the Celtics a little bit there, but no, give the Cavaliers credit. They did a stupendous job coming back from that deficit. Granted, it was only in the first few minutes of the first quarter, but still, a lot of teams would have been like, it's not our night. Folded sense, that's all right. We'll see you there. We'll see him there in late May. Yeah, the chips fall where they may, because obviously you have to get through 2 rounds. First round for the Celtics and Cavs should be easy. Second round could be a little bit dicey, but we would think that both of those teams will get to a conference final. But the one thing I'll say is with Cleveland, they've been just otherworldly this year. They've been well above that I could ever imagine when it comes to exceeding expectations. I thought they would have a good year. I thought they'd have a solid year. I'd have to go back and listen to the NBA preview back in October, but I don't think anybody in their right frame of mind, I don't care how big of an NBA fan you are. If you said to me October, no, the Cavaliers are going to win 60, 62 games minimum, I would have been like, I don't know what you're smoking. And even then, I'm sure the big NBA fan couldn't even predicted that. But give it up. With the Thunder on the flip side, now we saw them have a big year last year. They were a 1 seed. We know about them losing in the second round of Dallas, and they have a guy who's going to win the MVP and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But the one thing I worry about them, and I'm more sold on the Thunder than I am on the Cavs, because, like I said, the Cavaliers are going to have pressure, and I think the Thunder will have pressure on them too. But the Cavs are going to have pressure because they're going to have a team that is going to go into the postseason riding high, and they're going to hear about and read all the press clippings about how this team won the East by 10 games, arguably the best team in the NBA overall. That includes OKC and Boston. And, yeah, that's got to creep into your head a little bit. And I understand Donovan Mitchell's a guy that maybe he's built for this, born for this. He's had big-time postseason games, etc. But he hasn't gone to a conference final. This may be the year he's going to get there, and I believe they're going to get to a conference final. I'd be shocked if they don't. But getting to a conference final on the heels of a big-time regular season doesn't mean anything. You got to get to the big dance and play in the big dance in order to stamp your regular season for approval. So all I'm going to say is that if you're Donovan Mitchell, and even the head coach for that matter, Kenny Atkinson, but more so the players, if you're Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, you know that it's going to be – your season is going to be graded on what you do for the conference finals and beyond. I mean, anything short of that would be just a flat-out disaster every year. I don't care who you are. Even if you lose in 20 overtimes in a Game 7, let's say against the Bucks, there are no excuses. I don't want to hear it. And I don't care if you were up 2-0 in the series and Milwaukee came back and won the 2 games. I don't care if you were up 3-2 and Milwaukee won a Game 6. And I don't care if you're in the 15th overtime and the score is 212 into the 16th overtime. And somehow, some way, Giannis and Damian Lillard, they get one more point than Cleveland does, and they go on to a conference final, let's say against the Celtics. I don't want to hear it. No. I don't. And the same goes for Oklahoma City for that matter, because, all right, you lost to a conference final. You lost in a conference final last year. You got to get to a conference final. And even me, they have to get to a final, even with their young core, young nucleus, etc. But here's the thing that would worry me about OKC more than Cleveland. We know who the go-to guy is in Cleveland, Donovan Mitchell. We know who the go-to guy is on OKC, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a.k.a. SGA. Now, you do have Darius Garland that is willing to take a big shot. You do have a guy like Max Strus. I understand that he's not maybe the one guy you want to have the ball in the hands there late in the game, but we've seen him more so regular season and postseason, but he can make a big three. And Evan Mobley, I think, maybe not a guy that's going to be in the spotlight when it comes to making a big basket late in the game or giving him the ball to take that shot, because we know it's going to be Mitchell. But I don't think Mobley is a guy that would shy away from the big moment. Who's that guy in OKC other than SGA? Who's that guy that you're going to say, oh, he's definitely the number 2 guy or 2 option that's going to take that shot? Who, Jalen Williams? Lou Dort? It's not going to be Chet Holmgren. So when you look at the Thunder, and we get it, I go heavy with SGA, a guy that would also look to distribute, but are you going to feel comfortable of anybody other than SGA taking that big shot, let's say in a Game 4 when you're down 2 games to 1, and it's 101-99, or even worse, you're down 3-2 in the series, and you got to get back to OKC, and they're double teaming SGA, and he's kicking it out to whomever's on the wing or on the perimeter. And in your gut, are you going to feel 100% comfortable that this particular, my guy Bio, yes, Cavs are looking good. Are you going to feel comfortable that whomever on the Thunder is going to be able to take that big pressure shot when you need it? Where at least in Cleveland, if it's not going to be Mitchell, Garland is a guy that is not scared of taking that big shot, or a guy like Evan Mobley if for whatever reason they kick it out to him and he's going to be able to take a 15, 18-foot jumper, that's the one concern I have with OKC. And listen, they both had big years. And I'm more sold on OKC than the Cavaliers. And it's even maybe a little bit odd to say that, only because Donovan Mitchell, with his years in Utah and him playing in the postseasons then, when he had big games as a member of the Jazz, whether it was against the Clippers or the 1 year that they played Dallas. What was that? I think it was 3 years ago, where he had big games before. That was his last year before he went to the Cavs. And he knows his way around and certainly is not going to shrink in big spots. But even with that experience, for some reason, I like OKC. They're a little bit more cohesive. That's not to say that the Cavs aren't. But I think the experience from last year, being a 1 seed, losing in a conference semis, hopefully that will stick with them when we get to April, May, and beyond. But I don't know. My gut just tells me I have more faith in OKC than I have in the Cavaliers as far as getting to a final and winning the whole thing. Now, can the Thunder win the whole thing? I think they can. I think the Cavaliers can too. I don't want you to think that, because I'm not giving any high praise. I'm giving them their respect for what they've done to this point. But to me, how I look at it is that I still need to see it more, and especially in a big spot against a team who already has won a title, if it is going to be Cavs and Celtics when it's all said and done, in order for me to believe that they could take that next step and go far. Where OKC, and I get it, they're unproven. Last year was indicative of that. And that's why I'm hoping their experience from last year will translate to this year, knowing that, all right, we know what it takes to now beat a team that has a veteran presence, a la last year, whether it was Luka and Kyrie. And then this year, whomever they face in the first round, I won't even say first round because they should dispose of the 8th seed, whomever that 8th seed may be coming out of the West, but the 4-5 matchup. And who knows? Any one of those teams, whether it's Houston, whether it's the Nuggets, whether it's even the Lakers, could end up being a 4 seed when it's all said and done, because that would be the 4-5 matchup. Whomever it's Houston, Memphis, or Houston, Lakers, or Denver and Houston, any one of those teams, because it's a logjam there in the middle of the West. I can sit here to say that it's a foregone conclusion that the OKC Thunder are going to advance to a conference final, but I would only hope that what transpired last year and what they were able to experience, the head coach is going to have to drill that into their heads, especially when they get to that point, to say, hey, guys, we were here at this time last year, the coach Mike Daniel. We were here last year. We saw what happened. We can't have that for a second year in a row. Because at that point, they're going to look like frauds. And I understand they're still young on the come up with young players and a nucleus that's still building and forming and with a boatload of draft picks to come. But you can't just think that year after year you could be 1 seeds and you could just let it slide. One of these years you're going to have to advance and go far to show the world that you belong, to show the world that your regular season wasn't just a fluke. And we've seen regular season teams in the past put up big numbers, big wins. The first team that comes to mind was the Hawks in 2015, when I believe they were 62-20. And they went to a conference final. What happened? They got swept by LeBron and the Cavs. So those are just things to keep in mind here as we move it along. And then you could even look at the game tonight as a precursor to what could possibly lie ahead. And if you go back to my NBA preview, as I like to say, check the receipts, I picked a Boston OKC NBA final. Is that going to happen? Who knows? But it's just a finals preview. I understand it's good. Again, fodder for sports talk. You could even argue what we saw there on Saturday with the Lakers and Celtics, the two seeds in each conference. That could be an NBA finals preview. Now, OKC has already played Cleveland twice, so we're not going to see them from now until the middle of next month. Excuse me, but we can have some fun with this NBA finals preview. We'll see. Now, Jalen Williams is going to be out of the lineup tonight for the Thunder, so that's going to be a big piece. But then, of course, Kristaps Porzingis, who has not played here in the last 4 or 5 games, he's not going to play. So it's not a situation where both of these teams are whole. So you can't really gauge this being an NBA final, knowing that if the NBA Finals started today, I would think Jalen Williams would probably give it a go. Same for Kristaps Porzingis. So that's what you have there for ESPN tonight, 7:30 between those two teams. Excuse me. Should be a good one. Should be fun. And I'm sure a lot of people, obviously I'll be in tune to that. And yes, you're right about that, Jonathan. Yeah, Jose Iglesias. The Blacks are immaculate. Excuse me. Now, he's a guy, DeAndre Hunter, I think is complimentary to, and I forgot him also. I meant to mention him as far as a guy that adds depth to the Cavaliers roster. Yeah, he's a guy that makes threes. He's a guy that knows how to win, comes from the University of Virginia, a guy that has contributed there when he was with the Hawks. So he's a guy that you're certainly going to have to pay attention to. And I'm not big on X factors and things of that nature, but he's a guy that could be an X factor because he's going to need to defend guys like Jason Tatum or even Jaylen Brown for that matter. He's going to have to contribute offensively in order for the Cavs to not put it all on Donovan Mitchell or even Evan Mobley for that matter. So I do think that's a very important trade that happened right before the deadline. So you're absolutely right about that. But I would think he's a bit more of a glue guy than Jose Iglesias. I can see the comparison, though, and that's a good one. But Hunter is a little bit better than I think Iglesias because think about this. Iglesias, you talk about the timing being right for him. When he was brought up last year, May 31st, came onto the team and then started hitting. And then, of course, we all know what happened after that. He was a guy that the team rallied around, almost that underdog mentality of a guy who's been a journeyman infielder who's now getting not necessarily one last crack, but he's up with a big club, had an opportunity. He seized it. He batted well over 300, batted 337, I believe, last year. Had the hit song, which was a theme and a rallying cry for the Mets in that second half for them to get to October. So it was a perfect storm for him. Now, is he going to have that same impact in San Diego? Granted that they're 3 hours behind and we're not going to watch Padre baseball up until 1 in the morning here on the East Coast. But I can see the comparison. I know what you mean. But we'll see. Hunter, that was a big addition. And whether or not he's going to be able to uphold his end of the bargain as a guy that's going to defend and make some threes and score points and be a contributor to that offense, to the linchpins of that Cav offense, well, that we're going to have to wait, and more so in the postseason than here down the stretch of this regular season. So that's what you have there with the NBA. And like I said tonight, sold on Cavaliers and Thunder. Again, it's all about the playoffs. That's when you're sold. I'm sold on what they've done and respecting what they've done. And even though, like, as you've listened, I like the Thunder a little bit more. But when it comes to the Cavs, that's where it's going to be really interesting, especially with the Celtics quite possibly standing in their way. And by the way, a team that they lost to in the second round last year in 5 games. I get it. Donovan Mitchell didn't play in those last couple of games. The Celtics did not have Kristaps Porzingis. We get it. But we shall see when we get to that point, if we do get to that point with those two teams. And speaking of which, I haven't watched the Celtic City. I haven't watched the second episode, which I plan to watch today, and I wanted to watch it before I did this live stream. I love the first episode, and I'll judge it fairly and accordingly with the whole scenario regarding how Bob Cousy was, in essence, the NBA the first 15, 16 years. Well, they started 46, but when he came onto the scene in 1950, played there to 63. Won those titles. Bill Russell comes in there after they won that title in 57. And for the Celtics to really take off there, they needed Russell to be a part of the team. Of course, the themes of racism there, more so that story in Lexington, Kentucky, where Frank Ramsey, who, of course, great Celtic back then, who played, and there was that scenario where the Satch Sanders, the Sam Jones, Casey Jones went out to eat prior to the game. And when they sat down and were asked, "Oh, are you guys basketball players?" And Sam Jones, just for grins and giggles, said, "No, we're not." had their menus taken away from them, and then they left, and there was a disband of the teammates there, knowing that the players who were a part of that, the black players on the team, they didn't show up. They, in essence, formed their own boycott. And not that that broke the team where there was a chasm between the white players and the black players, but that was just indicative of the times there in the 60s. And not that that was the Deep South, but still. And I thought it was a very good episode. I got to watch episode 2, which I believe will be Russell from 63 or the end of that 63 season to the end of the 69 season where the Celtics won in 7 games. That's the Don Nelson shot off the back of the rim, high up, and then through the hoop, where Jerry West was the MVP of the finals in a losing effort. And prior to his death, that was West's biggest loss as a player. No, it wasn't the 69-70 to the Knicks. It wasn't any of the other losses to the Celtics prior to that. That was the one because a lot of people thought the Lakers were the favorites and they should have won. Granted, Game 7 was in their building, so you knew that they had the home court advantage. But because of how that all unfolded and with Russell being the player coach and obviously having to go through the 60s with the civil rights movement and the meeting there between Russell, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, I believe a young Lou Alcindor was a part of that. I'm sure that's going to be highlighted in this episode. So looking forward to watching that. And then after that will be the 70s, probably leading up to Bird, and then obviously the 80s and so on. So I've certainly enjoyed the first episode, loved it, and looking forward to watching the next one, which is already out. It's every Monday for the next 7 weeks, starting again this coming Monday, the 17th. So for those who are, I'm sure a lot of people hate the Celtics out there, but for those who are interested in basketball history, the history of the Celtics, which was led by executive producer Bill Simmons. As we all know, he's a Celtic nutcase from Boston. So I just thought to throw that out there for anybody that wants to watch that. Now, one other thing I want to talk about before I sign off, and let me see if I have this headline here. Did I lose it? Maybe I didn't put it up. No, it's not that one. That was the one I wanted to erase if you caught that quickly. So that is a terrible faux pas on my part. I haven't erased a lot of the stuff that from previous live streams that I had. But for those out there who have short memories or remember this from, it seemed like 5 minutes ago, let alone 5 years. And I may have that down here, do I? I do. All right. So I will calmly and coolly type this in to bring it up for your edification. But I remember this day 5 years ago as if it happened 5 minutes ago. And that is this. It was on March 12th of 2020 when the Big East tournament, pretty much around this time, the Big East tournament was going on, and I believe it was it St. John's Villanova? Or was it Seton Hall Marquette? May have been Seton Hall Marquette, which was the high noon game to start off the Big East tournament. Well, the Big East tournament started Wednesday, but to highlight the quadruple header that day. And I remember at halftime of that game, I believe it could have been St. John's Villanova or Seton Hall and Marquette. At halftime of that game, that's when they called it off. And then just seemed like minutes, forget about hours after that, the Big East tournament was canceled. And then you had a scenario that night where Rudy Gobert, I believe in an interview with the press where I guess they're talking about COVID and how it could shut down the sport or suspend the sport for an indefinite amount of time. And then after the press conference, he's rubbing the mics, if you recall, and he was the first player that ended up getting COVID that we knew. And I'll never forget how college basketball came to a screeching halt. Then the NBA came to a screeching halt, the National Hockey League, and just within a matter of hours. It wasn't as if they had the college basketball, and then they canceled that. And then the NBA played, let's say, that night and the night after, and then they called it. Same for the NHL. Baseball, they were just starting their spring training for the most part. Well, in the middle of it at that time. But here it was. COVID impacting not only America as we know it, but now the sports world as we watched it unfold, and it went off like a light. And we had to deal with no sports. And to me, at that point, I was 2 years into my podcast. And yeah, it was a challenging few months before we got baseball back in the latter part of July. And then if you recall, the NBA and NHL postseason started July 31st in their respective bubbles, in Orlando for the NBA and then in Toronto and Edmonton for the NHL. But as crazy as it sounds, 5 years, and it flew by. I mean, as we get older, time, it doesn't fly. It zooms. And all I could think of at that time, I hate it, bye. I feel you, 100%. And then what was this, John? I remember LB. Yes, the game's there in the latter part of 2020. But that was the one thing before we even thought about fans coming back and what it was going to be like, those first couple of days, especially when they shut down sports, that's when the reality hit. Because we knew that once this became stateside and the epicenter here in New York City, and how when I say we, maybe not all of us, but for those who lived here, how we were affected by it. And for me, it wasn't until a week later when I was working in corporate America, how the office said that we're going to start working from home. And people didn't know how long this was going to be. People didn't know that this was going to last for the remainder of 2020 until a vaccine came about. And then I believe it was early January of 2021. That's when the first vaccine came out. And then slowly but surely they're getting rolled out and people getting vaccinated. And that was still a big question mark, whether or not you couldn't contract it. And I'm not going to get into the whole COVID rabbit hole by any stretch, but those first couple of days when the sports world shut down, because unlike movies or concerts or anything like that, sports is day to day. We watch that right in front of our eyes. When it comes to movies, yeah, there could be movie sets all over, whether in New York, LA, what have you, but that isn't something that we watch intently. A production on a movie set where we just sit back and hang back and just say, oh, let's watch the actors do their thing. And we're not watching it on a day-to-day basis. With sports, we do. And knowing that the plug was pulled because of COVID, it was almost as if we were taken aback. We were aghast, like, no way, this is really happening. And right, we saw what happened there the few months after that. And to think today is the 5-year anniversary of that. Does it seem like 5 years? Absolutely not. It seems like 5 minutes. And all I remember from that time when the Big East was canceled was, is sports ever going to come back? Especially the way we knew it. And as Jonathan mentioned in his comment, how you had the paper cutouts. And how weird was that, especially in baseball, where they had to pipe in crowd sound and to get a feel for what the watching on TV for what the broadcast would look like or it seemed like. And you couldn't replicate if somebody hit a home run, just the roar of the crowd or the effect of a stadium being full when it had paper cutouts and when you knew that there was nobody in the ballpark. I mean, that was, I don't want to go as far as saying eerie, but it had a weird feel. I mean, that's all there is to it. And for those who jumped on the chat, I see we got 5. I jumped on the live stream. I appreciate you guys and gals. And if you want to leave a comment, please do. I'll highlight it here, just like I have with Jonathan's comments here. So don't be shy. Please feel free. This is a open space, safe space to talk about whatever's on your mind. When you want to talk about COVID, and I'll get to Jonathan's comment in a second when he just typed. But yeah, that's the one thing I remember about this day 5 years ago. And the ensuing months and trying to produce podcasts, and I came up with a lot of like list podcasts and events as a sports fan. and things of that nature. And it reminds me, you know what? It goes back. I got to plug this in real quick. It goes back to the live stream that we had on Saturday, the anniversary. So let me see if I can bring this up here to share my screen. Because I say this, I meant to put this as a screenshot, and I didn't do so, so that is my bad. So let me pull up this one thing that I want to show you guys and gals. And I know I'm digressing here for a second. Let me see if I can find this. I know I got like a zillion tabs open, which is obviously not a good thing. Don't you think that when you have a lot of tabs open, is that indicative of what's going on in your life at the time? Is that a good parallel? I know that may be strong, maybe harsh, but if you're taking offense to that, like, oh, Jay Rios just hurt me in the heart right there. Yeah, right now I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 18 tabs open, so that means my life is in disarray. It's out of order. No, that's not to say it's 100%, but it can be an indication of, hey, what is going on here? Why do I have all these tabs open? Why can't I close any of these out? So as I'm trying to look for this particular tab, because I want to share this with you, it's very important because I know I'm taking this back to the live stream of almost 2 weeks ago. So if you just bear with me here, is this it right here? No, that's not it. This had to do, if you're wondering what I'm trying to look for, this had to do with the trivia question that we had. And I know trying to find that on the internet was a challenge, to say the least. And yes, I'm still going through tabs, people. So if you're wondering, wow, Jay Reels, how many tabs do you have open? And what's worse is that not only on one browser, it's on 2 browsers. Does that really make me a bad person? I think it does, to a certain extent. Yeah, did I X out of that? I know I didn't do that on purpose, considering. Is this it? Here we go. Got it right here. So now, let me share this with you guys. This is Muckrack, which is a weird site. So let me share. As I shared with you that day, who was my first guest on my podcast many moons ago. Yeah, I know, sharing with 2 monitors. Yeah, go ahead. Remember this? Here you go. Just to show you, as I pull it up, Salicata. And here's the date. I'm sure you can see that. March 13th. Here was the answer to the first trivia question. If you recall, what was the topic of my second podcast after the first one? And of course, here's your first one, maiden voyage, and here's the second one. Now, this came out March 2nd. Now, I understand March 1st is the anniversary, but I posted this, and it's not going to show the time frame. I posted it after midnight. So to me, March 1st was the day of the curtain being raised on the Jay Reels podcast. So March 2nd, 2018, this is my main voyage. And then here's the second one. Podcast housekeeping, don't believe the hype. And I got on the Rockets and James Harden. And then, although you may say, well, hey, Jay Reels, look, here's Evan Roberts, March 19th. But yes, Sal Licata right here, March 13th. So if you go to muckrack.com, you could go back and listen to this, because I tried to look for it on Apple, Spotify, and I guess it only catalogs the previous 300 podcasts. So, of course, this is 2018. We're now more than 7 years into this thing. So this isn't one of the 300 that are left for you to listen to. So I just thought to bring that up for a little fun. So how about that? So as I stop my screen here and get back to my visual here. Now, Jonathan, I think after 5 years, people are still mad they shut down sports. Is that right? I'm kind of curious. Yeah, I'm sure you have a faction of people that are idiots. Oh, we should have played, blah, 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 so on and so forth. I mean, obviously, this was something that no one has ever experienced. Nobody was around for the Spanish flu in the 1920s that happened, or maybe it was even a little bit prior to that. And obviously, we're much more advanced here in the 20s in this century than the previous one. But hey, listen, they had to take precaution, they had to take measures, and not to be all revisionist history about that, but what was done. And now, here we are 5 years later. And I just thought to bring that up as a remembrance to think that was the beginning of just one of the craziest years that we could ever fathom, with the election that year, with the whole George Floyd fiasco. That's not even a fiasco. It was a disaster. And not only that, it was just tragic with what happened there, the social justice, the just so much that had happened that year. And this was pretty much at the very beginning when you think about it, because January, I know that's when it started to gain traction, and wondering, is this ever going to come to the States of course, from China? And then it did. And then New York became an epicenter where I live. And then that was just it. So now let me see. Val, what do you got here? What's up, Val? I appreciate you jumping on board. How do you think the Giants will do in Major League Baseball? Jonathan, that's an interesting comment. I want to get to that. San Francisco Giants. Now they lose Blake Snell. They bring in Willie Adames, and they play in a very tough division, as you know. Now, I don't know if the Giants are going to be a fringe playoff team, or they're going to be one of those that are going to be on the outside looking in. I'd have to say yes. And I hope they do better than whatever their number is in Vegas. So if their number is 82.5 as far as their over-under win totals, I'm not in love with their rotation. No, listen, what do they have? Logan Webb, who's very good. And who else did they bring? I got to pull up the Giants roster here. Off the top of my head, I do not know. And you know what? I should know that, even though I'm in baseball mode as I'm warming up to it, but I'm not like locked in to break down rosters at this present moment. So if you bear with me here, I could see what is going on with the Giant team. Yeah, Robbie Ray, of course. Justin Verlander, who they signed as a free agent. Logan Webb, Keaton Wynn, Tyler Rogers, there's your reliever. Listen, pitching is not terrible. Jordan Hicks, he was the former closer on the St. Louis Cardinals. And then, the Patrick Baileys of the world, Adames, Chapman. Yeah, I'm not in love with their lineup. I know Mike Yastrzemski has pop. Jung-Hoo Lee they brought in. I'm not going to say they have a long year. I could see them being somewhere around 500. But I don't see them having a big year. I don't see them along the lines of competing in the division. Maybe they'll compete for a bottom rung playoff spot in the East. But, the Giants, I think they'll be respectable, but I don't know if they're going to be a team that a lot of people can have their eyes out for as one that could have a big season. A big season for them to win 90 games and somehow get into the postseason. So that's what I have the Giants right now, Val. I hope that answered it. And I'm sure you're probably cursing me out saying, no, they're going to be better or what have you. And I understand you're a fan, so I totally and truly get it. Now, let's see. Yes, I go back to the scenario with the questions. Oh, here it is. I was looking for the tab. Jonathan, I don't watch NFL football or tennis or hockey anymore. I found new things to do. Now, why? I'm curious. I know you love baseball, and I know you're a Met fan, but no NFL, tennis, hockey? I'm kind of curious. Giants got Patrick Bailey, probably. Yeah, exactly. Best offensive player, you would think. So, and even Bio, who I know is a big-time Dodger fan. Sure, I got to shut you out. And then what does Jonathan say here? Padres, D-backs, Dodgers are killer teams. Well, right, the D-backs, as we all know, went to a World Series 2 years ago. The Padres, they slipped up quite a bit last year. How they respond is going to be interesting. Yu Darvish, Dylan Cease, no Blake Snell, Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado. Listen, I think the Padres will be good, and I think that they'll probably be one of the 6 teams in the playoffs. And that's the thing. You could almost get an idea of what the National League is going to be as far as the playoffs for the most part. You know it's going to be the Dodgers. You know, in all likelihood, Phillies or Braves to come out of the East. Central, Brewers, maybe not so much. Cubs, quite possibly. But then you have the Mets, the Diamondbacks, maybe the Giants. I don't know about the Pirates or the Reds. Seems like that because one of those teams will falter and end up in last place or close to the bottom. Yeah, I think, and Bio looks like last place for the Giants. I don't know about last place. Let me think. No, I just have to say the Rockies. Rockies are still bad. Yeah, Rockies are just a god-awful team. So, and I'm looking forward to baseball. 2 weeks from tomorrow, in earnest, the season begins. And I know Bio's pumped up because Tuesday the season begins in Japan for the Dodgers as they'll play the Cubs. So we'll talk about that on Monday's podcast. We will talk about that tomorrow. And for the Dodgers, what is that number? 104.5, I believe, is in Vegas for the over on the win total. So 105-57. And listen, they have the players. They had the depth. They could do whatever they want to try to bring players in. I don't know if I would choose that number just yet. But if you did, like my guy Bio, I mean, how could you not? The team is locked, loaded, even reloaded after them beating the Yankees at the stadium there in that Game 5 in October. But, yeah, the Dodgers, right now, they're your front runner to win the whole thing. I mean, that's not going out on a limb. So I'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. I'll have a baseball preview there in 2 weeks. I'll talk Dodgers and Cubs on Monday's podcast. Tomorrow, you're going to have pick up where I left off a little bit today with the NFL, NBA, baseball, Tommy John for Garrett Cole. That's a big loss, but not as big as you think because the American League is that bad. So that's why this isn't a season. I'll go as far as saying a season-defining blow, meaning that without their ace, that their season is going to be defined by not having Garrett Cole. Remember, he didn't start the year last year. In fact, he didn't come back till mid-June when he told the rubber for the first time. And the Yankees were perfectly fine. So with him out the whole year and probably part of next, I'm not looking at this Yankee team like, ooh, they're going to be at 500 by the time the All-Star break rolls around. No way. I don't think so in the least. So, and everybody knows I can't stand the Yankees. So that's what you have, Jonathan. I like the Brewers. Yeah, I mean, the Brewers, they have good young talent. And the Cubs, they've done some things here, more so with their pitching. I know they brought in Kyle Tucker from Houston. They let go of, as we all know, one Cody Bellinger. Yeah, to me, that division is tough to gauge right now. I mean, of course, it's easy to say, go Brewers. I can see the Cubs. Cardinals, yeah, they're a mess. Pirates, Reds. I would say as of right this moment, it'd be Cardinals. It'll be Brewers or Cubs. Cardinals right now are also middling in the middle. Yeah, and again, I haven't talked about baseball as far as a preview or anything like that, which I'll probably do in the Monday after next podcast to kind of get everybody teased and ready to go for what will take place from March 27th through the end of September. The end of September. So that's everything with the baseball. What else? Yeah, I'll get into Tiger Woods tomorrow a little bit more. Tiger, who ruptured his Achilles, and that's going to be out for pretty much the entire golf season. And we all know the Masters are now, a month away, a month from tomorrow. No, well, the 10th? Well, it's 4 weeks from tomorrow. So not necessarily 30 days, that full month between now or between when the Masters begin and now. But I'm sure the golf fans are going to be pumped up, geeked up to see what's going to happen down in Augusta for those 4 days. So, and let me see if I have anything else. No, that's pretty much it, people, as I get through it and through another episode. If you have any other questions, I'll leave it open for a minute. If anybody wants to pop up, and I'll be sure to throw it up on here. As always, people, you know the drill when it comes to the podcast. Apple, Spotify, the J Reels podcast, or of course, I have the video portion of that on my YouTube channel right here at J Reels. Please tell your family, friends, foes, frenemies to subscribe, like, leave a comment. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. As you know, I'm doing this full-time, doing this from the love, and I'll continue to do it until I really start gaining some momentum and traction in this podcast universe to start generating some funds, adding some little wrinkles and twists to this podcast along the way. One day, my hopes and dreams is to have a studio where I can just walk in and that's it. Not that you see my kitchen in the background. No, that is not a Zoom feature where it doesn't look like I'm home, but I am. I want this to be as smooth, as transitional, and quite frankly, to have this live stream of the podcast become a household name. And I'm not going to stop, slow down, or anything as long as I'm alive and breathing throughout the course of time, as long as I'm able to do this no matter where. Whether it's here at home, if I end up in a studio somewhere, park, a garage, who knows. But I am truly grateful for all of you chiming in and sharing your thoughts and, of course, spreading your love and spreading your time out with me to talk about what goes on in the wonderful world of sports. All right, let's, this is an example of a banner. Yes, we know about that. That's another test. Those watching on replay, yes, that is a test. I want to get to the last one, which means, as we all know, the live stream every Wednesday. And I guess now is a good time to say thank you to all. I see no comments from the guys or girls in the room. So with that said, people, another podcast tomorrow, as you well know. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in this wonderful world of sports. And if you haven't done so, once more time, subscribe, like, leave a comment here on YouTube, as well as any of my other platforms that the podcast gets streamed on, Apple, Spotify. Please leave me a review, throw me a few stars as well. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following social media accounts: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the J Reels Podcast, Twitter, JReels1, just the number, the old-fashioned way, the J Reels Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA, as I like to say. And like the shirt says, Pura Vida Miami. I'm hoping to get them as a sponsor to this podcast. I've written to them. Yes, I understand it says Miami, but they do have locations in New York for those who do live in the tri-state area. They have one in Midtown, or near Midtown, 26th and Broadway. And they have one in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, as well as one in the East Village. I've reached out to them. I'm trying to get them to be a sponsor. I've been going there since 2017 when I visited Miami. So, yes, I am not sponsored. So if you're wondering what the shirt is about, probably should have said this at the beginning of the podcast or the live stream. But nevertheless, out here just trying to do my thing. As you all know, I love sports, in the blood, in the DNA, talking about it since birth. And as long as I'm in front of this microphone and camera, I will continue to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on all of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from wham to wherever you are, the J Reels Podcast always comes correct, directed, in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Thanks so much again for passing by. Tune in tomorrow to the podcast. I'll be back next Wednesday with another live stream. And until then, everybody, peace, love, and God bless. On the flip.